John Foster began his artistic career illustrating interior art and covers for TSR and Wizards of the Coast, but he soon moved on to comic book covers. His paintings are oil on canvas, which are later scanned into a computer to add digital effects, and they feature dark and moody colors. His artwork of Aayla Secura for the Star Wars Republic comic inspired George Lucas to add the Jedi to Attack of the Clones, but he also did the covers for the 3 books of the Force Heretic trilogy. I'm not crazy about how he depicts the Skywalkers and the Solos, especially Mara, but I do like how his covers feature our heroes right in the middle of action. Force Heretic Reunion made it to number 13 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of July 20th, 2003. Before starting Reunion, I actually accurately guessed a fair bit of the Zonama Sekot plotline, but I definitely did not read this book because Han and Leia and Nom Anor's plotline were very much unfamiliar to me. So, a brief summary. The harrowing search for Zonama Sekot is finally over for the Jedi aboard the Jade Shadow. But as they work to convince the living planet to aid the Galactic Alliance, the Yuuzhan Vong launch a full-scale attack on a major communications base. So it's up to Han and Leia and their new ally, Grand Admiral Palayan, to stop this attack despite staggering odds against them. Like we saw with Book 1 and Book 2, Reunion follows 3 main plot lines. We have Nom Anor in his role as the prophet of the Jedi heresy, taking revenge on a number of the other members of the Intendant cast who he did not like in the past. We have Han and Leia and Jaina and Jag headed to Onidax to try to meet with the next member of the Rin network, while Tahiri Vela lays in an unconscious state facing off against her other personality, Rena Quad. And then we have Luke Skywalker, Mara Jade, Jacen Solo, Danni Kui, Tekli, and Saba Sabatine, as well as the Imperials they've picked up along the way, finally headed for the system where they believe Zonama Sekot lies. So first, let's check in on the Jedi mission. The book starts out with them initially having trouble just navigating through the unknown regions because it's unknown, it hasn't been charted like the rest of the galaxy. They find where the system should be, but it's very hard to get there. It's almost as though Zonama Sekot has surrounded itself with some sort of bubble like exists at the edge of the galaxy. And it takes a bit of effort on the part of all the Jedi on board to get through that bubble to the system. They arrive to find that the planet is under attack by the Yuuzhan Vong, and then they're all knocked out and slowly brought back one by one, allowed to land on Zonama Sekot. Poor Tekli is forced to stay with the ship while the rest of them, as well as the Imperial scientist, Dr. Soren that they picked up, head to meet with the Magister. If you've read Rogue Planet, you may recognize the Magister because this is Jabitha, the little girl who befriended Anakin all those years before. In her role as manager, she communicates directly with the spirit of the planet, which is Sekot. They've been allowed to land, but they have to convince the native Faroans as well as the planet itself that it's worth leaving Sanctuary to join the greater fight against the Yuuzhan Vong. I sort of expected there would be more revelations about Zonama Sekot's past, but not here. I suppose that will come in later books. In fact, most of the book is taken up with this plot wherein Danni Kui is kidnapped by a group of rogue Faroans. Jacen and Saba Sabatine take off after her, and then they're sort of split in half. They have to prove to Zonama Sekot their intentions. Sekot as Anakin and as Vergere talk to the 2 different groups led by Luke and Jacen, and decides to join the fight. But if you were wondering, is there any resolution to the possible Jacen/Danni Kui romance? The answer would be no. After leaving her hanging literally in book 2 when he ran off with a revelation in the middle of Danni expressing her feelings, we don't get anything from Jacen here, any movement towards a relationship between the two of them at all. He obviously takes off when she's been kidnapped, but Sekot forces her to be unconscious for most of the time, and she's just dragged around on a stretcher. If I were to compare the solo twins and how active they are in regard to getting things done, Jaina met Jag Fell again in Dark Journey, and by the next book she was changing her relationship status. But I guess Jacen is a dawdler, and so there's just no progress on the Jacen-Danni frontier. And then over on the Han and Leia mission, the book opens with them on Onidax trying to find out who their contact with the Rin network will be, only for Han to be accused of cheating at sabacc and thrown out of a bar. Jaina reports in that she's found nothing and she's heading back to the ship. And then a riot breaks out, and it becomes very important that they make it back to the ship. They're getting ready to take off when someone bangs on the Millennium Falcon's hatch and Han goes down, and it's his old friend Droma. We last saw Droma at the end of Balance Point. After Agents of Chaos Jedi Eclipse, he had been reunited with his sister, and so after the debacle at Duro, they decided to move on and keep going in the galaxy. He tells Han that he too was trying to contact the Rin network, but they told him there wasn't any openings, and could they just drop him off at the Senix Juvik sector along the way, because obviously they're going to be heading to Esfandia. The Solos are like, no, why would we head to Esfandia? And then they find out that the Yuuzhan Vong are now going after the New Republic, now Galactic Alliance's only 2 Outer Rim communication centers. One on Generis has been completely knocked out, and so the one at Esfandia should be next. They head off for Esfandia, they arrive. It's a really weird world because there's no sun, so the native species have had to evolve in a very strange way. They run into Grand Admiral Palayan because he apparently has chased the Yuuzhan Vong forces from Generis to Esfandia, and they join forces and fight the Yuuzhan Vong together. Han and Leia head down to the surface to try to find the base. They realize that they've accidentally killed some of the natives. They find the base, there's a traitor on the base, and they instantly think it's this poor Nogri because he doesn't smell right. They set up a trap. There's lots of fighting on speeder bikes, but in the end, everything is saved. The Nogri nobly sacrifices himself, and the traitor was someone completely different. Meanwhile, for most of the ship battle, Jaina is watching over Tahiri, who has not awoken since the end of Refugee. She decides that she should lend her strength to Tahiri by forming a Jedi mind meld with her. And once she's in there, she can see that Tahiri is facing off against Rena. But Tahiri and Rena soon discovered that they can't kill the other one without hurting themselves. If they want to survive, the only way they can is by the 2 personalities joining together. Obviously, Tahiri couldn't survive without accepting Rena, without accepting that part of herself. But I'm not sure I feel about how it went down. Obviously, it wouldn't be healthy if Tahiri had these 2 separate sides of herself. But I feel like I need a little bit of time to accustom myself to this new Tahiri who seems different, and it's hard to spot Rena or Tahiri in her, but I guess that is the case, that she's a new person. I like seeing Droma again, although it does really emphasize the fact that with Han and Leia working together as such a good team, Droma's not needed, and that was part of the reason why he got pushed aside after Balance Point. That when Han's traveling alone, he needs a co-pilot, he needs a companion. But if he's with his wife, he's not alone, and then Droma at times becomes like a third wheel. And then finally, we have Nom Anor's plotline. As I said earlier, Nom Anor, in growing his Jedi heresy, has decided that it'd be a good time to take out a bunch of people he didn't like. And since he has an insider in Shimra's court, the priestess of the deception sect, Nagala, he uses her to accuse people of being heretics who are not heretics. Of course, this would not be a Nom Anor plotline without him being betrayed. First, he's betrayed by Shun Mi, one of the shamed ones in his congregation, who has apparently been listening to someone else and decided to take Nom Anor out. But we never find out who was the one that pushed Shun Mi to attempt to kill Nom Anor. So there is someone trying to take over the organization, so to speak, looming outside the picture. And the last we see of Nom Anor, he's using the priestess's Villip to watch Shimra's court, only for Shimra to turn on the priestess. She commits suicide and he throws her body in the pit. So I guess Nom Anor's gone back a few steps. He's alive, but his double agent is dead, and he was starting to cause some mayhem and confusion and unrest on Yuzan Tar, but he's not ready to commit to overthrowing Shimra. And honestly, I don't know if he would ever be ready to commit to overthrow Shimra. That just seems like a step too far for him. So first, some final thoughts on how these books were structured. I still don't like it. I think I would have rather that Williams and Dix actually fully committed to having a no-chapter book rather than essentially making 3 books that have 4 really long chapters in it. And especially when these books are so big compared to the other paperbacks and so slowly, moderately paced. If I didn't have the little deadline hanging over my head of you have to finish it by such and such date because you're doing a review, I might have put it down for a while. I also felt like with the lack of chapters, some pivotal events in Reunion got dragged out a bit too much. Near the end of the book, Sekot is talking to Luke in Anakin's form and Jacen in Verger's form and says, "I have something important to say." And that happens with both of them. Like, it happens with Jacen's and then it cuts to another scene and then it goes to Luke and it ends the same way. And that just felt so unnecessary to me. Like, it was needlessly dragging out what Sekot had to say by having us experience it twice before we actually got Sekot's revelation. There were also some weird continuity errors, which I'm not sure to blame on editing or the preparation that they did for the novel, but the first was how when Droma is telling his life story since he and Han split, it almost seemed to imply that Droma left after he was reunited with his sister at Fondor, which is not the case. Han was in charge of a bunch of refugees, including a group of Rin when they were on Duro. He didn't part from Droma until the end of Balance Point. And so that felt a little off. Like, there was such emphasis on when Droma was reunited with his sister at Fondor and not when we parted ways at the fall of Duro, which is the later event. And then at the end of the Battle of Esfandia, when Grand Admiral Plain is mopping things up after the Yuuzhan Vong commander basically kamikazed himself, we get a reference that the Widowmaker is there. But the Widowmaker is not there at all. The Widowmaker accompanied the Jade Shadow to Zonama Sekot. So it's just things like that where I would have expected an editor to catch it before it made it to publication, but it didn't. But my biggest issue with Reunion and with the Force Heretic trilogy as a whole is definitely a your mileage may vary problem. I found a lot of the ideas in the trilogy interesting, but how they were executed meant they didn't fully connect with me. Han and Leia traveling around the galaxy to tie up loose ends from the Bantam era has a lot of potential. Yet, why are they doing it now at the tail end of the series? I'm sure that the in-universe answer is that the Yuuzhan Vong are focused on other things right now and they wouldn't have been able to travel so freely before then. But when you map out their journey in this trilogy on the galaxy map, they are all over the place. Mon Calamari, to Galantos, to Bakura, to Onidax in the Minos cluster, to Esfandia, is a lot. And I'm not sure I buy that they would be able to go to all those different places in this time frame. Also, I have spent too much time poring over the galaxy map, so number one of the Republic's 2 Outer Rim communication centers is on Generis, but that looks right in the middle of the Yuuzhan Vong's initial invasion path. And 2, I think the Solo's journey would make more sense to me if they hadn't stopped at Onidax in the Minos cluster, because it is way too far out of the way. Likewise, Luke and company do a lot in this trilogy. They help the Imperial Remnant, they visit Csilla and the Fells, and then they finally meet with Zonama Sekot. Yet at the same time, a lot of it felt like padding for length. Especially in this book, in Reunion, where they find Zonama Sekot early on, but then the rest of the book is just explanations and running after missing people and then more explanations. And finally, I think that most of the revelations in this book are supposed to hit the reader really hard, but instead they fell flat to me. We find out in the end that the leader, the founder of the Rin network, is Droma. But we don't find out because he told Han. Instead, all this information happens off the page. He told Tahiri and left, and then Tahiri tells Han, and I didn't like that at all. Droma's ready to tell everything to Han when it looked like things were not going to go well for them down on the surface of Esfandia, but they got interrupted. And so for Droma just to jet off and leave at the end instead of letting Han know, I thought they were better friends than that, so I would have liked to actually see that conversation. And likewise, when the Jedi land on Zonama Sekot, they learn that other Jedi besides Vergere have visited the planet in the past, most specifically Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And not just that they visited the planet, but that Anakin killed someone there. This was one of the parts in Reunion that I was really anticipating, Luke learning more about his father's past. But it felt lackluster to me, like Williams and Dix were relating things that happened in Rogue Planet, but nothing more. So, in short, I'm glad that I finally read the Force Heretic trilogy, because there were elements that I really liked here. But my final verdict is going to have to be too long, could have been edited down into 1 or 2 books. In the end, I'm not sure that the first and second installments of Han and Leia's mission were important to the story, and Luke and company's side jaunt to the library at Csilla definitely could have been condensed. I liked where we ended up by the end of Reunion, but it was a rather slow journey to get there. And I can see why so many people, myself 20 years ago included, gave up along the way. So next time, I'm going to be reading the penultimate book in the New Jedi Order series, The Final Prophecy by Greg Keyes.